It's the mid-1970s, you're living in the Soviet Union, and you've heard whispers about a band called Pink Floyd. Their music is said to be unlike anything you've ever heard. It's dreamlike, rebellious, and emotional. But here's the catch. Owning their music is illegal. Even being caught listening to it could land you in jail. Can you imagine this? Yet despite the risk, you, like many others, crave the sound of this mysterious Western band. This is the story of how Pink Floyd's music, a symbol of resistance and freedom for many, made its way into one of the most tightly controlled regimes in modern history. Hi there, my name is Dave, and I brought you now over 700 videos in this niche that is progressive rock for over 3 years now. But my goal is to introduce the finest music and stories to a younger generation nowadays, the millennials, to bring a more rewarding experience. So, to understand why the music of Pink Floyd was such a big deal in the Soviet Union, we first need to look at the political climate at the time. So, the 1970s was smack in the middle of the Cold War. Now, this was a period of intense tension between the United States and the Soviet Union. The Russian government, under leaders like Leonid Brezhnev, were deeply suspicious of Western culture in all its forms. Rock music in particular was seen as a dangerous influence, a symbol of capitalist decadence and rebellion against authority. The Soviet state controlled nearly every aspect of life. The media, art and music were all included. Western rock bands like Pink Floyd were blacklisted. Their music was banned from radio stations and was not available in record stores. Soviet citizens were expected to listen to government-approved music, often folk songs, glorifying the Soviet state, or the classical works from Russian composers. Anything else was seen simply as subversive. But banning something only makes it more desirable, right? And this is exactly what happened with Western rock music. The more the Soviet government tried to suppress it, the more the people wanted it. So why was it that Pink Floyd, in particular, became such an underground sensation in the Soviet Union? So first, let's talk about the music of the time. So by the 1970s, Pink Floyd were a global phenomenon, known for their psychedelic soundscapes, complex lyrics, and albums like Dark Side of the Moon and Wish You Were Here. But their music wasn't just popular because it sounded cool, although it definitely did. What resonated with the Soviet listeners were the themes embedded in the lyrics. Think about it. Take The Wall, for instance. It's an album about isolation. It's about oppression and the feeling of being cut off from the world around you. Sound familiar? For many of these Soviet citizens, this really hit home. Living in a totalitarian regime meant a constant feeling of being watched, controlled, and isolated from the rest of the world. Now, even though The Wall was about personal struggles, it really echoed the political and social reality of life behind the Iron Curtain. But as you can imagine, getting your hands on a copy of The Wall, or really any Pink Floyd album, wasn't at all easy within the Soviet Union. Now, this is where the real ingenuity of the Soviet Pink Floyd fans came in the form of how they managed to distribute and listen to the band's music. Really quite ingenious. Now, you might have thought that those band albums would literally be impossible to come by. But where there's a will, there's a way. And this is such a fascinating side to this story. So in those early days, some of the most coveted Pink Floyd records were actually made from old X-ray films. Yes, you heard that right. X-rays, as in the ones doctors use to check if you've broken a bone or the like. Now, these bootleg records, known as Roentgen, were produced by cutting circular shapes out of discarded X-ray films, then using a homemade machine to press grooves into them, effectively turning them into makeshift vinyl records. How ingenious! Now imagine listening to The Dark Side of the Moon while seeing a ghostly image of someone's ribcage spinning on your turntable. Sound quality? Well, you can imagine it wasn't great, it was crackly, it was distorted, but for many it was the only way to experience Pink Floyd. And then as cassette tapes become more popular, bootlegging took on a whole new form. Western tourists, diplomats and sailors often smuggled Pink Floyd albums on cassettes into the USSR. Now, once a tape made it into the country, it was copied and shared in an underground network of music lovers. This practice was called magnitsidad, or magnetic tape publishing. These bootleg tapes would circulate from hand to hand, often degrading with each copy, but still allowing listeners to experience this magic of Pink Floyd. Now, it is worth noting that this just wasn't a casual hobby. If caught, people could face serious consequences, from fines to prison sentences. Yet the risk didn't stop people from seeking out and sharing this forbidden music. As one Soviet listener recounted in an interview of the Times, he'd said, "When we listened to Pink Floyd, we didn't care if it was legal or not. It made us feel alive, like we were part of something bigger." Whilst these crude X-ray records and bootleg tapes were popular methods of distributing Pink Floyd's music, Soviet citizens had another secret weapon in their musical arsenal: shortwave radio. Stations like Voice of America and Radio Free Europe broadcast Western music, including Pink Floyd records, into Soviet territories. These broadcasts were often jammed by the authorities with layers of static or propaganda songs playing over them. But listeners would still tune in, trying to catch snippets of Another Brick in the Wall or Comfortably Numb. It became a kind of rebellious game, finding the right frequency at the right time of the day when the atmospheric conditions were just right, so you could hear a few precious minutes of music before the signal was lost again. And even though the broadcasts were in English, a language that was not really widely spoken throughout the USSR, the sound of Pink Floyd's music didn't need translation. It spoke directly to the emotions of the listeners. In a 1979 article from the New York Times, a Soviet teenager was quoted as saying, "We listen to this music because it makes us feel free, even if it is just for a few minutes." What a lovely feeling that is. So what was the impact of all this forbidden listening? Well, it's hard to overstate the cultural significance Pink Floyd had on Soviet youth. The band's music inspired a generation of underground Soviet rock bands, many of whom tried to emulate the band's psychedelic sound and politically charged lyrics. One example, Machina Vremeni, translated as Time Machine, one of the most famous, whose members openly cited Pink Floyd as a major influence. Like them, they wrote songs about isolation, alienation, and the struggles of life under a repressive regime. And when their music had to tiptoe around the Soviet censorship, their message was clear to those who were willing to listen. But by the 1980s, as the Soviet Union began to crumble and reforms like Glasnost, which was a policy encouraging openness and transparency, allowing for more freedom of expression, Pink Floyd's music really was no longer hidden. It had become a symbol of the resistance, a reminder of the lengths people would have gone to just for a little taste of freedom. In 1989, as the Iron Curtain began to lift, Pink Floyd's The Wall was famously performed in Berlin by Roger Waters, the band's bassist and primary lyricist. The performance, with the actual Berlin Wall as a backdrop, symbolized the end of an era of division and oppression. For many Soviets who had risked so much to listen to the band in secret, this concert was a powerful reminder of just how far they'd come. This story of Pink Floyd in the Soviet Union is more than just a tale of smuggled records and cassette tapes. It's a testament to the power of music to break down barriers, both physical and political. And at a time when the Soviet government tried to control every aspect of life, including what music people could listen to, Pink Floyd represented something untouchable: the spirit of rebellion, the desire for freedom, and the universal need for self-expression. For so many young Soviets, discovering Pink Floyd was like discovering a secret code, a language that helped them articulate their frustrations and dreams in a manner that state-approved art and music never could. And even though the government did everything in its power to keep Pink Floyd out, the band's music found its way in, through those bootlegs, through those broadcasts, and through sheer determination. Today, we take access to music for granted. A few taps on a screen and we can listen to anything we want. But the story of Pink Floyd's forbidden journey behind the Iron Curtain reminds us that music isn't just about entertainment. It's about connection, rebellion, and really sometimes survival. So the next time you queue up The Dark Side of the Moon on your playlist, remember that for some, it wasn't just an album. It was a revolution. What an amazing story of courage and conviction to be in awe of. And in this video here, I take a look at the visual impact that some of the King Crimson album covers had on their fans over the years. I thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you all next time.